Karen's scream echoed through the neighborhood like a dying cat being electrocuted. Which, to be fair, wasn't far from the truth. Her arms flailed in the air, her margarita launching in a perfect arc before crashing into my freshly mowed lawn. The moment her feet touched the water, a sharp jolt sent her airborne, her shriek turning into a garbled mess of disbelief and horror. The entire HOA party froze, watching in stunned silence as their queen of tyranny hit the ground with an unceremonious splash. I took a slow sip of my lemonade, watching the chaos unfold from my patio. It was almost poetic, really. Justice served with a side of chlorinated water. But to understand how we got here, we need to rewind just a bit. Because, believe it or not, this wasn't just about a pool. This was about war. A war that started the day Karen moved in and decided the entire neighborhood was her personal kingdom. And unfortunately, I was the villager she despised the most. It began with small infractions. A passive-aggressive letter about my garbage bins being placed 1 inch too far from the curb. A fine for my grass being uneven in color. Then came the threats. My mailbox was too modern, my car didn't match the aesthetic, and my dog was too loud despite never barking. I knew from day one that Karen had made it her mission to make my life miserable. But the final straw? The moment that turned this petty war into all-out revenge? She used my pool without permission. Not just once. Not just twice. She treated it like a community amenity, walking in with the confidence of someone who owned the place. At first, it was just her. I'd come home to find wet footprints leading from my backyard, my pool water suspiciously lower than when I left. Then she started inviting guests. One Saturday, I pulled into my driveway, expecting a quiet evening. Instead, I walked into a full-blown HOA pool party. Music blasting. People laughing. Karen lounging on one of my expensive pool chairs like she was Cleopatra. I stood there for a solid 10 seconds, trying to process the audacity. "Karen," I finally said, voice straining to remain calm, "why are there 30 people in my backyard?" She barely glanced up from her oversized sun hat. "Oh, Ethan, don't be such a grump. The community deserves to enjoy this lovely space. It's such a waste to keep it all to yourself." I scanned the scene in disbelief. People I had never spoken to were splashing around like they owned the place. My outdoor bar had been raided, a couple of dads standing around my grill, flipping my steaks. A kid, no older than 10, was aggressively dunking a smaller kid near the deep end. My blood pressure hit dangerous levels. "You need to leave," I said, forcing a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. Karen sighed dramatically, waving her hand like I was a pesky mosquito. "Oh, come on. It's just for a few hours. You should be happy to contribute to the neighborhood." "Contribute," I repeated, my eye twitching. "Karen, this is my private property." She didn't even look guilty. If anything, she looked annoyed that I was interrupting her little kingdom. "Oh, relax, Ethan. Don't be so selfish. We voted, and the HOA agrees. Your pool should be accessible to the community." I blinked. "You can't vote to steal my property." She laughed. "It's not stealing. It's sharing." I clenched my fists, inhaling sharply. "Karen, if you and your guests don't leave in the next 5 minutes, I'm calling the cops." That got her attention. Her face twisted, her usual smugness cracking just a little. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. You wouldn't." I pulled out my phone. "Try me." A tense silence settled over the yard. Karen pursed her lips, then stood up, adjusting her oversized sunglasses. "Fine. But you're being completely unreasonable. Just wait until the next HOA meeting. This attitude will not go unnoticed." I didn't care. They could have all the meetings in the world. I just wanted my backyard back. One by one, her guests slithered out, throwing me dirty looks as they grabbed their towels and half-eaten snack. My expensive lounge chair was stained with margarita. My once crystal-clear pool was murky with sunscreen and spilled beer. The moment they were gone, I locked my gate and sat at the edge of my ruined pool, seething. That's when I knew. This wasn't over. If Karen wanted to keep breaking into my yard like it was her personal resort, she was in for a surprise. I spent the next week researching. My first thought was security cameras, but that wouldn't stop her. I needed something more immediate. Then I stumbled upon an idea. A harmless, completely legal, and undeniably hilarious idea. It involved electricity. Before anyone calls the cops on me, let me clarify. I wasn't planning on electrocuting anyone. I'm not a supervillain. But a small, harmless jolt? Just enough to teach her a lesson? That was doable. A little electrical engineering, a carefully placed switch, and my pool was officially off-limits to unwanted guests. I tested it on myself first. I dipped my toe in, bracing for impact. The jolt was just enough to make me jump, my whole body tensing for a split second before I laughed. It was perfect. Now all I had to do was wait. Sure enough, the next Saturday, I heard the unmistakable sound of my gate creaking open. I peeked through my blinds, watching as Karen, in her usual oversized hat and designer swimsuit, strutted toward my pool like she owned it. I grabbed my lemonade, stepped onto my patio, and waited for the show. She dipped a single, manicured toe into the water. Zap! The reaction was immediate. A high-pitched, undignified screech tore from her throat as she jerked back, slipping on the wet concrete. Arms flailed. The margarita she had been holding flew into the air, landing with a tragic splash in my bushes. And then, with all the grace of a falling walrus, she tumbled backward into the pool. Screams erupted from the HOA guests who had, once again, helped themselves to my yard. Some of them backed away in horror, others scrambled to help, but Karen was too busy flailing and gasping to notice. I took another sip of my drink, suppressing a grin. Justice had never tasted so sweet. Karen's scream still echoed in my mind, a melody of poetic justice that played on repeat every time I thought about that glorious moment. But if there was one thing I knew about Karen, it was that she wasn't the type to back down. No, she was like a cockroach, persistent, irritating, and nearly impossible to get rid of. So, I wasn't stupid enough to believe that her humiliating dive into the pool was the end of it. If anything, it was just the beginning. The very next morning, I woke up to the sound of aggressive knocking at my door. Not just any knocking, the kind that said, "I'm angry, I have too much time on my hands, and I'm here to make your life miserable." I groaned, dragging myself out of bed, already knowing exactly who it was. Sure enough, the moment I cracked open the door, there stood Karen, her hair still slightly frizzy from yesterday's unexpected swim, her lips pressed into a thin line of fury. "You electrocuted me," she spat, her voice shaking with a mix of outrage and embarrassment. I raised an eyebrow. "You broke into my backyard," she scoffed. "It's not breaking in if the gate is unlocked." I gave her a long, unimpressed stare. "Karen, you do realize how insane that sounds, right?" She crossed her arms, refusing to acknowledge how ridiculous she was. "You put an illegal electrical trap in your pool. You could have killed me." I leaned against the doorframe, completely unbothered. It was a harmless deterrent. Just a little zap. The same kind of shock you'd get from touching a doorknob after walking on carpet. She pointed a finger at me, her eye twitching. "You are going to regret this." With that, she spun on her heel and marched away, but not before kicking over one of my potted plants like a disgruntled toddler. I sighed, running a hand down my face. This wasn't over. Not even close. Within hours, I received a formal notice from the HOA. Apparently, I was being accused of endangering the community with hazardous property modifications. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Karen had the audacity to break into my yard, use my pool without permission, and then file a complaint against me when she faced the consequences of her actions. Instead of panicking, I decided to handle this with the same level of pettiness that Karen had mastered so well. I sat down, drafted my own complaint, and submitted it to the HOA board. It detailed how Karen had repeatedly trespassed on private property, violated personal space, and hosted unauthorized gatherings on land that wasn't hers. To make things even sweeter, I attached the footage from my security cameras, crystal clear evidence of her waltzing into my backyard like she owned the place. It didn't take long for the HOA to call an emergency meeting. I arrived early, taking a seat near the front with a cup of coffee, prepared to enjoy the show. Karen stormed in not long after, her face flushed with righteous indignation. The rest of the board members shuffled in, most of them clearly uncomfortable, likely because they had been enjoying my pool just as much as she had. The meeting started with Karen launching into a dramatic speech about how I was a danger to the neighborhood, and how my reckless behavior could have caused serious injury. She emphasized words like hazardous and negligence, as if she was building a legal case against me.